I was gonna say, are we recording this?
Now we are.
Started a little bit sooner.
I
Yeah,
think the second you said footnotes are for bullshit academics, I hit record.
that's the next shirt. Is that the shirt for this part of the season? Footnotes are for assholes.
That's the t-shirt.
And
Kind of goes
it
along.
should say and academics, but funny story, it got cut off
It
halfway.
got cut off.
Fuck me. Can't
Oh
do
man.
anything.
Welcome to the 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter at the University of Rochester, in which we take a giant book, or in this case, two books, break it down bit by bit, talk about it, analyze it. This season, we started off doing Melville's The Confidence Man, of which I'm wearing my Grifter's Gonna Grift shirt today for our episode. And now we are switching over, as of today, to Melville by Rodrigo Fresán, and we'll be talking about the first 61 pages today. So I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Kaija, senior editor at Open Letter, translator from the Latvian. How are you doing?
I'm great, Chad. How are you?
I'm okay. And also Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox. How are you, Brian?
I'm great. I'm slowly but surely becoming more and more the color of wallpaper paste or other bodily fluids as the winter progresses.
You do your screen for anyone watching this on YouTube does have a single sort of tone to it. Like
You're looking a
it's
little
like you're layered. You're
looking a
layered.
little Bartleby.
Just an English, a cold English beige. It's just layers of beige. It's really, really depressing.
And we have a special guest this week who's Will Vanderhyden, translator of, I didn't look this up though. How many books have you translated and published so far, Will?
That's a good question.
That people have read.
At least, yeah. Well, that's an even better question. I think 10 or 11.
I was going to say 12. So in that, so
Maybe
somewhere,
12. Yeah.
so somewhere around there, including Melville by Rodrigo Fresán and four other Fresán books that we published, three of which we've been on the 2 month review, the invented part, the dream part, the remembered part, but then also you've done Bottom of the Sky. And Melville does match your whole color scheme, Ryan. You are like, you are
It really does.
Nailed it.
white on top, creamy brown on the bottom.
Can you just make that the YouTube the screen?
Oh yeah, you can do all that stuff. I just never do, but I'm gonna do it for this one. Because
This was on purpose. Come on, man.
Beautiful.
I'm gonna make that the screen cap for the picture on the website too.
I tried to do the hair with waves, but it didn't work out the way I wanted.
I mean, it should be said. So the cover of this book, which is really beautiful, was designed by Rodrigo's son. For anyone who's listening does not know that, he's going to be much older than I think he is, but he's like 13.
Oh no, he's
no,
like
he's starting
sophomore in
university.
college, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, God damn it.
Yeah, which
Yep.
He was 13 last time Rodrigo came to Rochester.
So
Yeah.
Doogie Howser did the cover design. He's about to graduate at 13 years old.
I mean, if there's anyone who could do cover design, it's a child. Like, to be honest, like not to shit on cover designers, although I have seen that list from LitHub or whatever, and I got questions, but like they know how to use programs.
That's
Yeah.
true.
I mean, to be fair, he did the cover design of the original, right? And
Yes.
we have Daniel Benneworth Gray to thank for the cover design of the English edition.
That's true, but they are almost the same. The sort of context is the same.
You have the original
Yeah,
in front of you, Will?
I can snag it.
Yeah, I'm curious what it looks like for those that are in the visual media.
Yeah.
Ah, nice. Okay.
Also,
That E is
this
that
matches.
E. So the E
No, this
shows up
matches
and doesn't show up.
my color palette.
Yeah, that's true. You're matching now too.
what is happening?
This is the weirdest opening to one of these podcasts
Perfect,
we've
you guys.
ever had.
Perfect.
So we're going to be talking about the first 61 pages, although I think mostly we'll be talking to you, Will. And I think that's a good place to start why don't you give us your elevator pitch for Melville?
Oh, geez. Putting me on the spot.
Yep.
Well, it is a maximalist novel about the life and work of Herman Melville, about paternity, about paternal legacy, focuses and zooms in on the life of Herman Melville's father, Alan Melvill, and takes these sort of key moments from his biography as like jumping off points for Fresán to sort of do his thing, um, in the way that he typically does, where he likes to look at particular moments in a writer's life and sort of see the intersection of the reality of their life and the fiction that they create. This sort of the way the life influences the work and the work shapes the life. It's not really a very good elevator pitch, but
It's okay. That's
it's a hard book to describe very, very succinctly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, going off of that, I mean, it really is like begins, at least in this section, for the 61 pages we read, it's almost the perfect stopping point. Again, I do not look at these very carefully. I just look at the page numbers and find markers. So it didn't work out well with Confidence Man,
No,
but
you
this
lucked out. Like you nailed it this
I know.
time. Yeah.
I hit that. I was like, holy shit. So it starts off with like Alan Melville is like on whatever particular day he crosses the Hudson to get home to Albany. And he then gets sick and gets feverish and dies 38 days later. However, for this section of the book from 1 through 61, it talks about his crossing the river and then goes back to sort of explain his whole life with like the footnotes from Herman Melville sort of jumping in and kind of uh doing what you're talking about, Will, of like expanding on like how this becomes like his stories and the novels. And then it ends having circled all the way back to their moving to Albany, to his father, Alan Melville, trying to like make a business again through Boston, through New York, not being able to get that done, coming back, trying to get back home, getting stuck and walking across the ice to Albany. And boom, that's the end of the first 61 pages. It could not have been planned better. Like it was the perfect like sort of way to introduce this. But like you said, the book is about like that father-son relationship and like the interplay between his Alan telling Herman like crazy shit as he's like feverish and sort of delusional about his life and about his tours and whatnot after he gets sick on this particular walk. And then how that may did absolutely influence Melville's writing and sort of leads to the idea of this. What I think Rodrigo seems to be fascinated by a lot is by creators or people who come up with something that really breaks literature or breaks the form. And like Moby Dick just breaks everything and seems to come out of nowhere. Like it's something that like is a bit of a rupture and
Terrible
does,
book, by the way.
yeah.
Terrible.
I have
Doesn't
I have
make
a
any
friend
sense.
who I'm not going to name because they might be listening to this, who drunkenly in a bar was like, Moby Dick's not even close to the best Melville book. It doesn't work. The first part has one voice, then it goes away, and then the third part has that voice. It's not the same. We're just like, I don't know what you're talking about, buddy. Like you're one shot too deep now. But anyway, so that's a good description of the book. As itself, but like, how did you find, because one of the things that when we were pitching this initially, before we had really like, I think before we even read it, but one of the kind of descriptions and log lines we were using is that it's almost like a coda to the trilogy, which anyone listening to this for a long time will probably be familiar with all the discussions we had about invented, remembered, and or dreamed and remembered part, and how those are really about this kind of ancestral heritage as well, this passing on of stories, this sort of like that lineage. And this kind of comes and sort of synthesizes a lot of those ideas and is very much again about that father-son relationship and the passing along of stories. Did you but at the same time it's written so differently. Like this is so much more
Mhm.
like Melville, whereas like the invented part, dream part, remembered part are different sort of voice. They're like kind of more bombastic within the text. It's more like the voice from those are in the footnotes here. Um,
Mhm.
for anyone who has not started reading this or does not know, this first section in particular, these 61 pages, there are 1 to 4 footnotes per page that are not like necessarily like explanatory, but are like Herman Melville riffing on whatever is written above, which is written in more of a third person sort of objective sort of viewpoint and reads sort of like, here is the life of Alan Melville. And then there'll be a footnote, and the footnote will be like this bombastic, like, Herman Melville talking about and filling in certain ideas, and they go on and on and on. There are certain pages that like are almost like this page that I'm showing right here is almost all footnote.
Mhm.
It just says like I can't see 21 maybe. Um, but there are a lot of that. But the voice has changed. So how did you find like going from the part trilogy into this in terms of your
Um,
work?
well, just to comment about the footnotes and like how I think that they're working here, it's sort of like the inversion of the relationship between Alan and Herman, you know, because Alan is historically sort of the footnote to Herman Melville's life, right? And so in this case, now Herman is placing himself in the footnote. So that's sort of how that's working structurally. Yeah, it was really it was a relief to start working on this book after the parts triptych because it's much more focused. I and just like yeah, just the sort of totalizing vision of the parts triptych is overwhelming, and that voice, you know, I think Fresán got tired of it probably too at a certain point, and was also relieved to be done and have it out of his head maybe. Yeah, I think relief, and then also I think there's always like there's a sensibility that's always the same with Fresán. I feel like there's the wordplay and you know extended multi-level metaphors and all these things that he typically does. But yeah, the style is different, and it's definitely inflected with sort of Melville's style. He says that he didn't really intend to do that, except for he says in the acknowledgments of the book that there was like the one thing that he tried to do that was sort of Melvillian, which was he used entonces a lot, which is like in Melville's language, that would be like the thence and the thenceforth, which I tried to incorporate some of those into the translation. I was definitely reading I reread Moby Dick and was reading the Herschel Parker biography of Melville when I was, because that's what's referenced a lot, especially in this first section for the biographical details, which I didn't know much about. So I was reading a lot of that and reading a lot of Melville while I was working on this translation.
That was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah, and so I guess I was just trying to immerse myself in Melville's style a little bit, but wasn't consciously attempting to like Melville-ize Fresán's prose. I feel like it's sort of him, like you said, riffing or doing his sort of take on Melville, kind of, but it's still his voice.
Not academic,
yeah,
like arts and craft wise. Like, what's Melville's style after reading it? Like, what did you hear?
I mean, I think that Melville is like, I don't know, in some ways he like, at least in Moby Dick, in some ways takes like all of literature that came before it and then like sort of anticipates all the literature that came after it.
Okay.
Broad strokes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess what is it to you? I mean, you're a writer. What do you see? And
Ooh, there you go.
So I'm only 60 pages in. I'm not reading ahead, obviously, because
but in Melville's style, if you have to answer that question.
I'll get there in 1 second, because like what I first noticed with this, what you're talking about, this, you know, like relief from after doing the triptych, you still get the sense of like the Fresán maximalism, but there's something like, for lack of a better term, like kind of gothic in this piece, which was really cool.
Yeah,
it's almost like if you love Quentin Tarantino and he's like, well, I'm gonna do a Edwardian, so it's like everything's gonna have that like mannerism to it, but that style still comes through somehow, and the voice still comes through, and I see this like crisscross of maybe like the focus and the restraint is like being stuck in the language and the times, but there's still that interesting worldview that gives you a really cool panoramic of the relationships, which I find really fascinating. But as far as Melville, good Lord, you know, we talked about him ad nauseum over the last 5 weeks, and it was similar to what you're saying, like pick how you want to dissect his work, and it works. Like, I want to do a colonialism, like, yeah, okay, that'll work.
Yeah.
I want to do a queer reading of it. Like, yeah, that'll work. Like, it's insane. I want to do a religious, yep, that'll work too. Like, it's encyclopedic and scary. like
Yeah.
the perfect word choice, the perfect verb, the perfect use of it, the perfect imagery, the poetry of it, the like, yeah, just it's really intimidating.
Yeah.
I
I mean, to get
absolutely
back to what you were saying about, yeah, I totally agree. But to get back to what you were saying about Fresán's Melville and the sort of gothic kind of vibe, just wait till you get to the middle section because that
Oh,
sort of
okay.
takes
Yeah.
off.
Okay.
And I think he sort of thinks of this as kind of his. I mean, yeah, he plays with the sort of gothic horror motifs and things in that section in
Oh, okay.
particular.
Interesting.
We
And
both
I
don't
think
want to say
you're,
something
Oh, okay.
that
yeah,
that
yeah,
Fresán says in all the interviews that will be linked to in here. He says it very forthright and upfront, but like leave it,
yeah,
let's just leave it be for
yeah.
the sake of
Sounds
like
good.
anyone
No,
not
no
aware that this.
spoilers. Yeah.
All right. So my hunch is correct. I wandered
No,
into
it's
it.
a great reading. I think.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing's like Frazan's always super elegant and in the writing and very, very on point. But even the first paragraph, one of the things I had marked in the very first paragraph, which has like a true confidence man Melvillian vibe to it. I don't read the whole. I will because I want to get to the point that I mean that I want to ask you or mention. Now he knows he's surrounded by everyone and everything, but he feels more alone than ever. Here, the perfect solitude of one outside, but with no way in. Freezing, but soon to burn, the fire of a fever already rising inside him, speaking in smoldering, scorching tongues, sparkling words that flame and name, far away and foreign to any warmth of home, to that home he's dying and where he'll die to return to. And I think what stood out to me about that, like there's like the kind of poetic nature to it. The beginning of Confidence Man is the description of the river. We're on a river here. There are certain like parallel things that are going on, but is that last bit of like the warmth of home to that home he's dying, pause, suspend it, and where he'll die to return to. Like because that's like lifted out there, you like hesitate on the like he's dying to return to. And I think that's a really beautiful like opening part to this book. It just stood out to me as like a really good choice and how it's framed and also like has something of that like 19th century kind of movement to it compared to like the very 21st century of like subject, verb, object, moving things along and not really like separating or causing you to like wait to figure out like the next part of the sentence. And I thought that was really well done. Like there are a lot of parts that I marked knowing you were going to be on here. They were just like, I think this is really good. I think this line is really, really special. Like, and then some things that are like
Yeah.
fun bits of the actual book itself are like the sort of questions it raises.
Yeah. I think that is sort of typical of his, and maybe it hits harder with the sort of more maybe slightly less maximalist and more focused style that's coming out in this book than in maybe the parts triptych, but like that serpentine quality where the sentences will wind around and refer to things, come back, sort of maybe run off on an extended metaphor, but then come home and hit that, circle back to what the point they were trying to make or whatever.
Right back on our first episode of this whole podcast, actually, about the invented part. Like I think I made some comment about how so many of his books open, Frazan's books open with like almost this like fits and starts. Like it begins and it like sort of rambles or it like brings you in. Like there's this voice from the ether that's coming and then it like kind of crystallizes into where you are. And that even happens a little bit here. And I think that that's like a kind of a hallmark of what he does and does well. We're drawing you in instead of being like the big like call me Ishmael sort of like banger of like
Mm-hmm.
here we are, here's the opening, or like the sort of like I seemingly the craft books that you've referenced, Brian, of like you establish something up front, things are direct, everything's plotted. There's this sort of amorphous quality to this opening, even and which to me reminds me of Confidence Man because that was like that beginning is very like kind of you're not sure where where you are, but you're in the crowd at the dock going on the steamboat. It's all like a little bit like pulling you in and moving you into a flow. And these first few chapters really do that here too. Like it's a like how does it written, how is this going to be told, all that kind of stuff, and then gets to like, and then on this day he walks across the Hudson River, boom, and then you're kind of there and move on. But is that you've read so many more of Frazan's books? Is that like an accurate thing to even say?
Yeah, I think so, and yeah, he's always like, it's always very self-aware of, what he's doing in this book, maybe less so than like in the beginning of the invented part, say, where he says like opens the novel with the question how to begin, right?
Yeah.
And then he's like self-aware down to his own orthography in that first opening sentence, like the reflection on parentheses as the beach or whatever, yeah, I think that's kind of always there, that and it's maybe a thing that's sort of typical of Latin American literature. I mean, you guys published that Macedonia Fernandez books that's just all prologues pretty much, right? Or the first section is all the first half is all prologue. So I feel like that that sort of that might be Latin American, or it might just be sort of metafictional. Kaija has a question.
I have a question. Yeah. Instead of trying to jump in with all the different internet connections, one thing to go off of what you're both sort of, what I think goes off of what both of you are saying, and I've been telling people that this is my favorite Fresán book in translation that I've read. It's certainly the one that I've connected to the most. And going off of what both you, Will, and Chad have been saying, I think, and this speaks a lot, and it speaks volumes to your ability as a translator, Will, and your work as a translator. But one of the things I think that comes through the most for me in this book is that there is, I think it's such an overt just enjoyment of the language. It's telling this story. It does have this late 1800s feel to it, which I like that period in literature anyway. But there's just such an enjoyment of the language, and like not a self-congratulatory of like, I'm so clever, I do these things. It's just, it sounds like, it reads like Rodrigo had fun writing it, and like that you had fun translating it. And it just, there's an enjoyment to it. And I really, really enjoyed that. That's one of the things that I liked most about it.
Yeah. I feel like that's true of most of his work, but sometimes I think the volume of the prose can like maybe distract from how much joy there is in language and how playful and fun it is. And then I think, and then also something that gets lost in all of that is, in all of this sort of metafictional hijinks, is like the actual beauty of his writing, the super beautiful prose and super moving moments that he's able to concoct out of the sort of onslaught sometimes.
Yeah.
What this section stood out to you, Brian?
The biggest thing that stood out to me was the parallel to Pale Fire. He even references it, like he sneaks in some fun little Nabokov references in it.
Lolita, the tattoo of Lolita.
Yeah. And then he actually mentions Pale Fire within the prose at one point. And then it's hard not to think of the idea of, I always wonder, like when you read Pale Fire, it's a poem by, like, what is it, Slade, I think is and then Kinboat is the academic, right? I haven't read in a while, so forgive me if I fail. But like the question is like, whose work is it? Is it Slade's or is it Kinboat's?
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that because of, it's almost like Kinboat's telling us, you don't know how to read this unless I offer you these footnotes. And let me, like, you won't be able to decipher this unless it goes through me. Like, I'm the filter that you need to help you out. And it's like this like weird, really strange character. And I don't get that sense from the footnotes here. But I begin to wonder, like, which Melville are we actually who's the more important Melville? Who's the real Melville here? Is it the father or the son? And there's this like fun play between, is it what's on the page or is it the footnote beneath that becomes more? It's really fun. It's a neat little game that I've noticed.
In this section, like metaphysically, it is curious too, because there are like two different writers, essentially, but it feels like there's not, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's like Herman writing the book and then commenting on it, but the way that it's written, it also feels like it could be like a totally different as if he's reading something about that life and then commenting on it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because
it's
of
almost like I feel like this happens there's in the parts triptych, there's the two fonts, often where the one it's basically like the footnotes are in the text there pretty much.
typewriter.
Yeah, in the American typewriter font. And they're sort of comment, or they might occasionally there'll be a different character's voice, like there'll be Penelope's voice, but it's always like, yeah, the one is sort of commenting on or riffing or expanding or justifying the other. And I think that's just a tick of what he does. I think it kind of, ever since Mantra, really, I feel like his books have all kind of had that quality, or that like structure. And here, yeah, I feel like it's almost like he's looking over his own shoulder as he's writing the third part, the third person part that's talking about Alan Melville's life, and then in Herman Melville's voice, he's having to comment, having to add these things, having maybe to justify like why he finds Alan Melville's life interesting, reading it against Herman Melville's life and against Herman Melville's work or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Mantra, I do like on page 48 where it hits a bit where it's like talking about their marriage and saying the smelting and forging of their surnames is viewed as inevitable, and they are repeated together like a mantra that could devolve into the worst of karmas, which is like two references to the earlier books.
Yeah.
And then later on, it's like everything seems suspended in the air as if a climax of an explosion. Feels like also maybe a sort of nod to the airplane in Invented Part and elsewhere. There's one.
Also the mantra. Yeah. Also airplanes and explosions. Yeah.
Yep. I thought there was one more. There wasn't. The other thing that I thought was really good, and that's like,
well, on page 33, there's that one ship that's called the Particle Accelerator.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Little Easter eggs.
Great.
There's so many. There are so many. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the extended Fresán universe.
Yeah.
Like the EFU for all the.
Well, so like we get the Nabokov Pale Fire, like kind of epitaph at the beginning, and then on 24, that's where I kind of started like really leaning into it, because when I saw like the amount of footnotes, I was like, oh, okay, Pale Fire, cool. I know he likes Nabokov, that makes sense. And then on 24, his face lunar as if stealing pale fire from the sun. And I was like, fun. Okay, let's go. Let's get it.
Yeah.
Well played. I like
it's one of his favorites. So yeah.
So maybe that's why, or not that's why, but so I did enjoy the Parts trilogy very much, but I felt a little unsteady in that world because I did not listen to the Kinks. I am not, I did not read Nabokov until like within the last decade. So all those referential jokes, and those are the main two that I remember are those two things. So while I understand them superficially, I don't understand the deeper connective references. And so being set in Melville and in this book, and you guys picking apart the references to other Fresán books and characters, like I get that I can orient myself with, because I know where those things are coming from. So I wonder if that's part of why I liked it a little better, because I don't feel as unsteady in the world of Melville as I did in the world of the writer.
Right.
So
yeah.
You never trip balls and listen to Dark Side of the Moon and people watching Wizard of Oz while you were in college? Because that's a good intro.
No.
They match up exactly.
Yeah. I feel that makes sense, Kaija, because the Parts triptych is so it's such a referential onslaught. It's like so much, and yeah, I mean, I think that this being more focused, it definitely makes it more accessible and more. It's not without its challenges, obviously.
No, it's very much, it's Fresán through and through. But yeah, it's and even now going through, so the very first footnote mentions with Confidence Man.
I know. I was just gonna say, like, the Confidence Man, although, like, I think when I read this, like, I'd read the Confidence Man before, but when we were working on it, I don't know how long that was ago now, but it was a while. On the edits for the book, like, I was much more focused on the Moby Dick, and like the Moby Dick as like a representation of something, and like that's kind of the most familiar of the Melville books, next to Bartleby and Billy Budd, I suppose. But like, it's like it was the one I was thinking on. Now that we've reread The Confidence Man, they just like lace throughout here so much. There's that reference in that
Mhm.
first footnote, but there's grift after grift. And Alan Melville's like, come on, or he's getting grifted. He's like, I'm investing in all these like kind of games and like possibilities and these businesses and just fucking losing like all the time. And you're like, oh, there is like a lot of Confidence Man in like that very baseline level, like not necessarily in the prose, but there is a part where it references, is it in that first footnote, Kai, with the masquerade and his mask?
Masquerade of my father.
It says rewritten wearing different masks like that of a Riverway con man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or delusional, and then or that of
the
the
sad
delusional
masquerade,
captain, and it goes on to the other Melville books, but
Yeah.
that one shows up right away. And the one I was thinking is like back on 50, it's kind on 50 is like, and before long, like Melvin Melville attracts attention for his wit and good looks and good taste and eye for selecting products and merchandise that will fascinate the most affluent people on the other side of the ocean, but also for the way in which he squanders money to finance transactions that always end up benefiting his partners. I just put graft, graft on the side, and I can imagine like this dude being like, I'm kind of descended from like this royalty and like I got a little money and we're gonna do this business and have a lingerie shop, which is referenced in here and all whatever. And people are like, come on, man, why don't you invest in this like special exotic like artwork that I have? He's like, sure. Like, nope. No workout. Weirdly, I remember this. I was reading this. One of the people I worked with at Schuler Books and Music is a Gansevoort and was related to the family.
Oh.
Like obviously distantly, but it was Tom Gansevoort. It means more now than it did then. I was just like, okay, whatever, buddy.
Buddy.
Got a big beard. You do look a little Melvillian. I can't find it now, but there is also one of the weird things I noted in here is that there's a reference to the book that he doesn't write, that he's like, maybe it was written by Hawthorne, or maybe he didn't write it, or neither of us wrote it, and it has a name and it's referenced in this beginning part. Do you remember where that is, Will, by any chance? You know what I'm talking about?
I know where it is.
I do.
Where is it?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Kai
Will.
knows where it
Will
is.
knows. Will knows.
No, you know, I'm not sure.
Page 21, because it's in the same footnote that talks about the Harper and Brothers fire.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, the Isle of the Cross. I do have it marked here. Did
Yeah, the Isle of the Cross.
copy of the Isle of the Cross, narrating the woes of a woman abandoned by the sailor whom she saved from drowning, also burned there? Where would it be? Blah blah blah. And I confess, and this is a very Fresán thing too, and I confess, sometimes I was inspired by real events that I turned into impossible fictions. Yes, I wrote everything rewriting something so I later could read it and only then understand it. That book, that story, like exists between the two of them. I forget how this goes. I meant to look this up, but there was like I think Melville went to Hawthorne and said, you should write this story, and gave him the story of this woman who, like, or there's a shipwreck and this guy saves this woman and then things go awry. And like, not too many years ago, maybe it's 10 years ago though now, because like time goes fast. Sarah Mesa and another Spanish author wrote this story as if they were writing it based on the notes of those two that existed, like this sort of outline of this sketch. And there is a book that has the two versions of it existent, and part of it's been translated, and I've read part of it, and when I came across it in here I was like, oh, that's right, I remember that thing. But it is like one of these weird footnotes that would be only in a Fresán book where like people would be like, oh yeah, this like random bit, like
I need to get my eyes checked because I looked it up and I wrote Isle of the Crows, like the bird, and I just found like stupid George R. Martin shit. And I just like, oh, that's a really good like made up thing. Like I totally bought that. Man, genius. Yeah. Oh, cross.
Isle of the
Okay,
Crows.
it's cross, not crows.
Yeah.
Isle of the Crows is way better than Isle of the Cross, but whatever.
That's a great.
Isle of the Crows.
Yeah, I
there's
want to see
nothing wrong
that.
with reading glasses,
that.
man. There is not enough light in the world.
There's not enough light in the world.
But there was
better. I feel better about running into a dead end.
With that one page too, like one of the things I like about like the play that we talk about with Fresán, or just generally like with the wordplay, where this is maybe a very easy example, but it's the sort of thing that I would use with my class for like how you do certain things with writing or with translation, is on 50 after it gets scripted, where we go back to like the kind of constant refrain of like Alan does a bit, but Herman obviously is like always wants to be on the sea. Like he's over and over like sent to like, live on the farm, and just is like, no, fuck this. I'm gonna go sailing and like tour the world, all that kind of stuff. And on that 50, it begins treacherous accomplices who, this is after it gets scripted, treacherous accomplices who first let and even prompt him to embark on bad deals, so embark that after watching him sink will benefit them when the tides wash up his cargo on their shores, and Alan Melville finds himself forced to liquidate at no cost. Like that number of like words related to like sea and water and all of that is like so jammed in there, and it's like it's kind of like on the nose in a certain way, and also like wonderful that it all revolves around the word liquidate.
Mhm.
As that final punch. I love that. And that would be a good example. Like I assume that a lot of those are kind of the same in the original, but also like as if it was like any need to compensate in any way, that's a good place to get that in, because there's so many phrases that we use in English that relate to like water and sinking and afloat. Your business is afloat, your business is sinking.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's the same actually in Spanish idioms, to be honest.
I had
Yeah,
a
I mean,
super woke. Oh, go ahead. Do you have something
no,
important to say?
you go ahead. I don't have anything
I want
important,
to
but
hear
I was
super
just going to
woke
say,
as a good lead in.
yeah,
So
now
my very
I'm
first
curious.
semester in college, this is in the year 2000. Uh, she was a Berkeley graduate and was way ahead of the curve with like what words you can use and what words you can't use. And she would not let us use any words that had a militaristic or attacking vibe to it. So in our essays, like you couldn't use words that had any violent connotation. And you start realizing like, holy shit, that's a lot of verbs that you just took out of my language I can't use now. Like I don't know, just to make something like, kill two birds with one stone. Let's not kill anything. It's like, well, no, we're not killing anything. Yeah, but it's a violent reference. And we're like, oh, okay. Like that example, like
Can't even
you
refer to
really,
like a man of war. Like
oh,
there's whole species that don't exist.
don't you dare. Yeah.
About
But no,
that.
that immediately made me think of that professor and how like just completely neutered. Well, maybe not a good word to use. Completely took away sacked. You can't say sacked because that's killing somebody or taking something over, right? Sacking. So yeah, but
I'm a sucker for like sports people and sexual things that they say unintentionally, just because all of the terminology surrounding like sports descriptions is so sexual. But there was like one quote, like, penetrate the lane. And again, there's like, I mean, it's always like just right kind of there. But there was one back in when I lived in Illinois and Chicago, this sports talk radio station would have like the quote of the year. And one of their quotes was from, I forget who, but like a coach or whatever talking about or analyzing some quarterback, and they said, "Well, he's got such a long, slow release. It's so easy to jump on his balls." And they're like, "That was the quote of the year for the thing," because it's like that's the most sexualized thing. And you remind me of that, Brian. You eliminate that too. Eliminate that from sports talk, and you're gonna have dead air.
so like this verb here, will embark, right? Treacherous
Mhm.
accomplices who first let and even prompt him to embark. Like obviously that's you think of a ship with embark.
Mhm.
Is that, like is there a similar verb in Spanish that has a nautical connotation to it that just or
I
did
was
you
just looking to see what it was in the Spanish,
because it's
but I
like
think
an amazing
there's
verb
a
choice. Embark
yeah,
on bad deals. Awesome. After watching them sink, right? Embark and sink. Awesome.
yeah,
Uh tides, wash, cargo, shores. Yeah, liquidate.
yeah. I mean, I think you're giving me a lot of credit, and a lot of it is there in the original.
Okay.
So, I mean, you have to. I think as a translator, you got to be like attentive to like the different layers of meaning of those word choices in what you're translating.
Yeah, yeah.
But embarcar is this, it's the same in Spanish. So
Okay.
And like that on the noseness of the, repeated like double meaning of these sink and embark and all these stuff that's revolving around ships and everything is all
Yeah.
it's all there. It's heavy in the Spanish too. So
And like,
yeah, I want to
I don't
take
want to
credit.
language nerd out too much, although I'm sure the majority of the audience would. Do you find like if we go back to more English words that are rooted in the Latinate, that do you like go there more often when you're trying to get a really close translation from the Spanish?
I guess I haven't thought about it consciously, but that could be true. I mean, it could be that you default that direction
Mm,
just because there are a lot of verbs that I mean, there are the false cognates that like sound like they're the same, but they're
yeah.
not. Don't necessarily have the same meaning or the same cultural um, connotations or whatever. But I think I probably do that without being aware of it. Now that you bring it up, I'll probably try to pay more attention.
Jeez. No, I mean, I always try to avoid Latin at all costs because I'm dumb and like I want something to be very plotting and monosyllabic if possible. So I always go for Anglo-Saxon, right? Fuck
Makes sense.
fuck conflagration. I'm all about fire. Yeah.
There must be someone that's using like computers to sort of analyze how often those kind of two roots appear in certain books by author, type, translator, whatnot.
Yeah.
Because it is
Definitely,
interesting.
there's definitely some AI doing it.
Fuck yeah, there is. There definitely is. If not, someone's writing a dissertation as of now.
Well, have you
Right.
played it all or Kaija, have you played it all with just like popping stuff into AI to see how it translates as far as just like a cold computer translation of something?
No.
Um, go ahead, Kaya.
I may have done a few like Google Translate things just to out of curiosity, but I haven't done anything with
Yeah.
AI.
Google's not as good.
Yeah, I guess I've played around with ChatGPT a little bit, but not like for a big chunk of text.
Yeah.
And not usually. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't found it super useful for me yet, though I'm open to the idea that I feel like I have to be open to the idea that it might be eventually useful. I just, I'm a little resistant, but I definitely see the
Same.
drawbacks and danger of it for artists in some ways. So,
I think
um,
you, Brian, have used it the most, maybe, but I've also used it a shitload for translation things, for my classes, for writing, for like doing all sorts of things. But
Mhm.
it is very interesting because like I don't know that it can I don't know. We don't want to go down the whole road of the AI thing. And I know that part of it is like the hand wringing, part of it is this knee jerk, like take the jobs away, which is true. Um, but if you're asking more on like what it tries to do with the language and the words, it does try and put things into a sort of contemporary context where it is clipped. And you have to dial it. Like the thing with AI is we always say like, oh, AI, but blah, blah, blah. But you have to set parameters on it and you guide it. Like when you work
Mhm.
with the ChatGPT stuff, you're constantly like kind of tweaking it or telling it, pushing it and massaging it, like getting it to stop lying and stop having hallucinations is one point, but then getting it to like move towards a certain reading level, like it defaults to a certain reading level that's very low. But like it doesn't work for like in terms of like to put translators at ease, I suppose. If you just like put this book in a chat GPT, it's not going to come out with this. It's going to come out
No.
with something that's very like generally would be more simplistic. The thing is that it's so fast. And the other thing is that there are certain things that works for or gives you a starting point. Like if you're looking at like this is a terrible example, and I shouldn't even bring it up. But Kaya, you're reading it is the Attila by Alyosha Cole, which is nonsense. Like for the most part, part of that was like used ChatGPT. Katie Whittemore used ChatGPT for part of it, primarily to find out what the fuck some of the words were, because they're like obscure, arcane Spanish words that nobody used, and like there was no way to even find. There, it was very hard to figure out like what anything was. But like when you looked at like what it churned out. And there's an essay that will come out that talks about this. What it turns out is not super helpful. Like it was actually much more work to like try and fix it because it wants to make everything at like a eighth grade reading level or sixth grade reading level. And when you have something that's like more complex than that, that's not the default mode. But
So what I found interesting though is like there's a like a hidden there's a hidden depth to that passage that you pointed out with all of the nautical,
Mhm.
verbs and references in it that I don't know that's gonna like it takes a human being to get that unseen depth that we feel. And it's referenced here in page 23. There's a footnote where it says, "Know this, ghosts live in books." And it just made me think of like there's all this like we're worried about AI taking jobs or like AI is not going to haunt us. Like a single book will not be haunted if it's written by a computer. It's not going to be there. And I love that he always yeah, this guy always has a way of like sneaking in some like really profound thing. And like for me in this section, it was know this, ghosts live in books. And I couldn't help but think of like obviously you think of like Hemingway and his iceberg, sure. There's something underneath the surface. Cool. Uh, but even better, I think, is like that idea of when he was teaching, Barry Hannah would always just write ghost story on the chalkboard. And that's how he taught writing. He just anything you write, it's a ghost story. And it's your job as the author to figure out what's haunting the work. And we'll get a sense of it. Like we'll get the surface, but there's something that's haunting this work. And to see that, like, just know this, ghosts live in books, and it's like, hallelujah, yes, they do. As long as we're writing them, and as long as Will and Kaija are translating them, yep, they will be haunted, as long as they're on our shelves. And and that's a great example, that line that we just kind of dissected until it's all the mystery is out of it. Like, yep, it's there. It absolutely.
that's funny because what I underlined on that same part right before that was it's true that I miss my habit of standing in front of the bookshelves, hands behind my back, to read the titles and connect the ones with the others to form sentences, and sometimes even using them to compose the seeds of brief plot lines that might one day germinate into long stories, which is like if on a winter's night a traveler. And then when you have the next thing being like the ghost that's in there, it's almost like that book is like, even if that's not intended by anyone involved, that sort of references back to that is a ghost within that even paragraph of like a reference or like an existent thing that sort of snuck in there that may not have been explicit or intentional, but like is kind of mapped on and would I mean you could translate the words, but it would be lost. I think that like the human is underappreciated.
Look at this one again. All right. Me there as if bewitched and possessed by all those dead voices, reincarnated in immortal letters. Good Lord.
Yep.
This guy is freaking annoying. Go away.
Lots of echoes.
Good
Lots
Lord.
of-
I love
Good
that point
Lord.
that you're making, Brian, though, that the ghosts live in books. I love that line too, and what
Yeah.
you're saying about how that's kind of. I mean, there's something really. I don't know, the whole AI conversation. I feel like there's something to be said about art being. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we got to be open to whatever, but like art being about human connection somehow, and I feel like that sort of gets to what you're saying. Also, that line that you pointed out, Chad, that also occurs in a different way. It's a reference to something that Fresán said he used to actually do, or his narrator in the parts triptych says that he used to actually do, which was stand in front of bookshelves and complete write new sentences with this off the spines of books.
of the titles.
Yeah.
I feel like when we talked, I feel like I can't remember now because there's so many books and so many episodes, but I feel like that came up. I probably said the same fucking thing. Like this is kind of like if on a winter's night. Yeah, there's not to end the or go back to the AI thing is always super annoying, but when you did like try and write about it and go into it and like use it as a tool, like the real thing is that computers can't fuck. This is like the key. This is the key to everything. Computers don't have intimacy. They cannot fuck. They are therefore not embodied in any way that makes ghosts appear or anything appear.
What are you talking about? It has a jack. There's a jack. There's like prongs. Come on, man.
Uh,
Pins. Yeah.
no.
Slide that jack into that plug and you're all good to go.
You're a 5 pin or 7? Oh, 7, please get out of here. I don't want a 5 pin. Go. Ew. Come on.
That's why nobody wants the lightning USBs anymore. It's too fast.
Zing.
It's going too fast.
I like my energy to come slow. You know.
Yeah.
Jeez, fuck me. How do we do
That's
this?
why
How
the
do we get out of this?
That's why the cordless chargers only work faster if you take the cover off your phone.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Nailed it. Can I ask one, like, this is just a stupid question, which is perfect coming from me. Does anyone know what is the typeface?
The body. I could tell you. I would have to pull up the InDesign file.
All right, because I
It's
tried to search
probably-
that, but it said it's not known. You should ask the publisher. So I'm going to ask the publisher.
Are you serious?
Yeah, the result I got said it would look in the colophon. I looked there, it's not there. Look in the near the back, it's not there. So I was like, all right, well, ask the publisher about it.
Yeah.
It looks super gorgeous though with the texture of the paper, and then this is stupid. And the serif.
It's not stupid. Tell me more.
No, like the texture of the paper and the serif font, like it gives that like I don't know, it just gives that like authentic feel for a 19th century piece of work. I love it. I don't know, it works really well, I think. I admire it.
These I have a question. Oh, sorry, go on, Kai. Did you open it up?
Yeah, I'm opening it up. My sense is that we use the same font family as for the Part trilogy, just because of how it looked and just having that. But
yeah, if you come back and just say, "Oh, it's Garamond," it's like, "Oh, fuck."
Oh yeah, no, it's Helvetica. Yeah, no, it's Georgia. I'm pretty sure. I'll tell you in a second. I'm pretty sure. Yep, my guess was Adobe Caslin Pro, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it works great. Love it.
It's a great font.
This book is really testing your eyesight, though. I do have to say, like the
footnotes said, like again, Isle of the Crows.
I've leaned into just accepting that I have to wear reading glasses all the time, but like before, when I would try and like be like, no, fuck that, there's no way, I'd just be like blurred over. Not that that's a bad thing. I think it does work very well, but that actually was a question I wanted to ask you. So going through to edit this was super hard in the way that like it was always because the footnotes are intentionally distracting. Like they're set in the middle of sentences, and there'll be like multiple ones in the middle of sentences that frequently I found myself just being like, well, I have to read the chapter, the top, and then go back and look at the footnotes separately because they're two different voices. They're two different like it's very easy to get lost. Like whatever sentence in the top could have been like grammatically all jacked up, but I wouldn't notice because like halfway through I went to the bottom and then to the top. And
yeah, hard to edit. Yeah.
But like, how did you guys find reading it like for the first time and encountering it? Do you like read to the footnote and then go read the footnote and then go back to where you were, or how do you approach that? Because footnotes work funny in this because they're not just like giving you information, they're giving you a voice and a character. Despite what like we're late into this, so Shade's throwing the stupid Wall Street Journal review that's like it's like Wikipedia, like get the fuck out of here, is the opposite of Wikipedia. Like that's so dumb. And like rereading this, I'm like, that's one of the dumbest things I think I've ever seen in a review.
Yeah, I don't think that guy ever he might have gotten into the second part. I don't think he read the book. So.
I don't think so either.
Or guy or gal.
No, it's a dude.
It's also okay if
you can Google it and I mean it's attributed. It's not like it's a
it is.
Yeah,
I didn't
yes.
know.
Yeah,
But
women
I
can be
didn't
dicks
actually.
too,
I didn't
okay?
read
It's
it.
not
I
just,
saw a
it's just,
screenshot.
come on, be open-minded.
And I was gonna
Yeah.
say it's also okay to it should be okay in a review to just say you didn't like it. Like, you don't have to take cheap shots like that.
Well, the ones that are
Yeah.
like reflective of your ignorance, I mean, that's what I would do, to be honest. Like,
I'm
if I
curious, what
like,
was the cheap shot? I'm unaware.
so
Oh, he just said that there was like it was a lot of it wasn't worth the work, essentially,
Okay.
and that there was like Wikipedia level information or something
Love
like
it.
that
I love
about
it.
the yeah, which doesn't feel like it has much to do with this book, but you know,
No.
Yeah.
super,
To that,
I don't know what's the right way to read it because there's not a right way to read it. But I would immediately stop as soon as I hit a footnote. I read it right away,
mhm.
and then I
Yep,
go back
same.
because then I gotta pick up my like I want to be interrupted, and so it's like shit,
Hmm.
okay, and I'm annoyed, and so I read the footnote with a little bit of annoyance,
Yeah,
and then I go back.
yeah.
I'm
I
like,
think
oh, that's actually a good footnote. But
right.
it's
Yeah, some of the
fine.
most fun stuff is definitely in the footnotes in this first section. This was really challenging when I was trying to figure out for different events that I've done, figuring out what to read in front of an audience. Because
yeah.
not only is it like broken up with the footnotes in this first section, it's like there's all the parentheticals all over the place. And like they break up a sentence and then you know, it could be like almost a full paragraph later before it picks up the idea that came before the parenthetical. So like trying to figure out how to read that and have it land um, was pretty complicated. But so I didn't end up reading anything from this first section ever. It was always from
Oh, wow.
the later
Yeah.
sections because the footnotes go away or they
Yeah.
change later on. There's no footnotes in the second section, and then they do something else in the third section.
Ooh.
So no spoilers.
No
Thank
spoilers.
you, thank you.
But that's I was curious about because I did the same thing reading it now, where it's like sort of a luxury to be able to like stop,
Yeah,
be interrupted rather than feeling like discombobulated. But it was nice to
right.
like
Yeah, I can imagine with the editor's sort of eye that it becomes challenging to like want to like if you're checking the sentence itself to be as a whole sentence, you want to get through it before you get interrupted. So I can see that being
I don't know
tricky
if
for
this
sure.
I don't know if this is the same for you, Kai. I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but like editing things too, like it's just such a different way of reading it. Like it's just like it's almost like you're not really reading it, you are, but like for something that's very specific that like afterwards I have the hardest time remembering books that I edited until I reread them to proof them. Or to do something, and proofing also has its own lens, but to read them separate from any of that, like even for this has a lens, but much less of one, but like the editing process is so different. Like it's just like it's like really locked in on like these line to line general tone, looking for ways to improve rather than enjoying what's there sort of idea.
you're
Like
in the weeds.
it's just like it's
Yeah.
the hardest thing to like to map onto like a long-term memory for me.
Mhm.
Like in the moment, I feel like I'm fucking there. Like I'm there and I'm like, oh, I can see all these things, and here's how to like, here's like a tip or a way or a point or a thing that can prove it. But then the second I'm gone from it, I'm just like, phew, I don't know what I read. I can't explain it to you at all.
Yeah.
Kaya, when you're doing revisions on your own translations, do you read them differently than like when you're getting it pretty polished? Do you read it differently than when you're editing somebody else's work?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I know that I I I know that I will inevitably still be too close to the
Yeah.
text. And so it's hard to step away and just kind of and let go and be able to read and enjoy your own translation. I think there are definite moments for me here and there where, you do a paragraph or a sentence or even like that like chef's kiss word choice where you do it and you're just like, fuck yeah, like I am on fire. I nailed it. But it's still not the whole book. So definitely I read things differently and like I do have some struggles with certain books and projects where, it's like the translation could go in two different directions stylistically, and then trying to figure out which one, like the one I'm thinking of in particular is the nonfiction book, where there are two very distinct paths that I could go down, and it's a matter of me making that decision. But
Yeah.
I also find it hard to go back. Do you go back and reread your translations once they're published, or are you just like, no, thank you?
I've kind of learned not to too much. I mean, except when I have to. I feel
Yeah.
like because you guys know that I'm like compulsively wanting to change things.
You
up to the
sometimes
last
make
minute.
like 3,000 corrections to a
That you guys think are totally irrelevant, but that mean something, that are meaningful to me for some reason.
Will knows.
Yeah.
Will knows from Alta this year that he's my story, like my number one story of like I get it, and I get it as a translator. Like, we want to tinker and we want to fix, but there's a certain point where, to the larger reading audience, like, it's okay. They're
Yeah,
not gonna
totally.
they're not going to have nightmares over it the same way that we are.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true. I definitely get weird and obsessive about it, especially when you're at the point of letting it go, and you're like, and you want to make sure it's so that you want to make sure that you can pick it up later when it's in print and look at it and feel proud of it. But
Yeah.
I don't go to Steven Spielberg very often for advice, but I heard this story about it was Matt Damon, and he was talking about Saving Private Ryan. And so he's working with Steven Spielberg, who's the director of that film, and they're doing a scene, and Matt Damon's saying like, "Yeah, I think I got about 80% of it. Like, it was pretty good." And he goes to the director because Spielberg wants to move on, do the next shot. And he's like, I got a little bit more. I think I can get it honed in a little bit better. Can we shoot that again? And Spielberg looks at him and goes, all right, so we can halt everything, stop, get it just a little bit marginally better, or we can move on and finish this fucking film and do something else cool. What do you want to do? He was like, oh, okay, let's just move on. And like for me, like that really like hit home for me, because it's like I want to be, oh, I have this 100% idea in my head, and I know I'm probably good enough to hit like 75% of it.
mhm.
It's that 25% that just haunts me. And
Hmm.
like I'm not looking at all the success I have. I'm looking at like, I could probably get a little bit closer. And it's like, yeah, you
Yeah.
can, but there's like this curve of like how hard it is to get closer and closer, and how much time it takes to get closer and closer. And it's like, how about just like say, that's really good. Let's move on and do more really good, cool shit, rather than just stay and wallow on a line.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
for
I
sure.
always like my mind always goes back to like still Steven Spielberg saying, or we could just like keep making a movie.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
how would have Ben Affleck handled that differently?
Yeah, exactly.
You would have been like, let me direct this.
Yeah.
good. That isn't there. I think there's a economic term for like the rate of efficiency, or like like where you get to a point where like, yeah, to improve it, the cost is so much higher than it is to just
Mhm.
let it be. And it's very
Mhm.
asymptotic in that way too. But yeah, I feel that a lot. As well with like editing or whatever. Like, you just have to let it go. No offense to
Mhm.
your tinkering. I appreciate the
No,
tinkering.
no, I get it.
Oh, it's important.
No,
But
I get it. No, I think that I own the tinkering and like just have learned. Um, yeah, I mean, I just need to yeah, there's just a point where it comes where I'm learning to let things go more easily, and then also just not to when it's done, when my part's done, it's done, and I'm
it's
okay
done.
with it.
And even when it
Yeah.
comes out, it kind of is too. It's like you like, I don't know, like we have like the errata thing. That's sort of different from it. But like there's that moment where you're just like, even no matter what we did, if you made like two sentences slightly better, nobody's
Mhm.
gonna notice that. Like there's a level of
Right.
like that sort of like you've gotten it so close to perfect that like it's very hard to know that who would be able to be sensitive enough to know that it was slightly better or could be
Right.
slightly. Like there's very few people that.
But say if all of those words didn't have that sort of nautical valence in that one sentence,
Right,
like would it hit the
right.
way it does? Those are the sorts of things, like especially with a writer like Fresán, I'm like, am I getting it all? Am I getting like, and so that's why this sort of manic kind of attention to things, I think. And
And
There's
even
a
after all that, it's still not worth it's not worth it for the Wikipedia references.
We still have
So you did it all for nothing.
we still have the Rupert Murdoch rag criticizing it, so
Is Wall Street Journal, that's a Murdoch one, isn't it? Oh God.
I think it is, isn't it?
I have no idea. I just know that it sucks.
It's the highest profile review that the book got.
I mean, yeah, that's true, which is always unfortunate. Well, I mean, the New York Times is too busy like shaming progressives and like kowtowing to like the centrist Republicans to cover anything anymore. But that's again, it's late in the podcast. Nobody's going to hear this part. We should probably start wrapping up, guys. It's been a while. Do you have any other things you want to bring up about this particular section, Brian, Kaija, Will?
I want to talk about the Harpers and Brother fire.
Yeah, do it.
So on page 21 in the footnote, it mentions a fire at the warehouses of publisher Harper and Brothers in 1853. And I found the newsletter, let's call it, from Harper and Brothers, effectively apologizing for any delays. And it's from January 1854, so I'm going to assume that Fresán was accurate and the fire probably took place in end of December 1853. But it opens with from Harper's New Monthly Magazine, opens with a word of apology. For the first time since the establishment of Harper's New Monthly Magazine, the publishers find it necessary to apologize for delay in its delivery and for deficiencies in its mechanical execution. The last sheet of the present number, illustrated with its usual pictorial embellishments, had just been sent to the press on Saturday, the 10th of December, when a fire broke out, which not only consumed the printed sheets, stereotype plates, woodcuts, and copy of the magazine, but in a few hours laid their entire establishment in ruins. And what happened there is that, ironically, they had a plumber working on some pipes, and he lit his lamp from a gas burner with a piece of paper. And instead of throwing the paper on the floor for fear of fire, he looked around for a place to extinguish it, and he saw what he thought was a pan of water in a small room next to where he was. And so he put the lighted paper in it, but it turned out to have camphene in it, which is used to clean, is used in the cleaning process. And that basically he dropped in a piece of burning paper into a can of chemicals. And so I'm assuming he's the one who sustained some injuries, but then it just goes on to like explain. But I wanted to do a little bit of research, and I thought it was so, I don't know if it's precious or just funny that that's just the approach that publishing took. A word of apology. Sorry for the delay in your magazine. Our shit burned down.
That is pretty great. Pretty great. Stuff happens, man. Those distributors always
happens, yeah.
Those distributors always have excuses. Any other sections? Any other comments? Otherwise, I have lots of lines of the week. That's one of the things that Competence Man was impossible to pull like a line at certain points in time, aside from like certain phrases or like that's the titles of the chapters or whatnot. But Fresán writes like almost like these lines stand alone as like beautiful, like fun and interesting like bits. Like there's so many of them. There's just so many of them that I have marked in here. So anyone else can pick one or bring up anything. Oh wait, I do have one last shout out. Dr. Wright Post. Hell yeah. A Dr. Post exists in this book. And maybe in real life, and I like that. I'm there for that. Little shout out. Anyone else can go first because I have a bunch.
I'll go if Brian doesn't have one queued up right away. Or maybe Will has one.
I'm scrambling now to find, there's plenty. I was just thinking I could read the footnote on page 17, which kind of, is a sort of summary of what this book is.
Yes,
and
that's
maybe
Yeah.
You want me to go first?
Yes, you go first.
Imagine a book always at high sea, a book adrift and drifting in the swirling digressions and dodging not icebergs of small tips and massive bottoms, but compact glaciers that have as much to show as to hide. A book that is nothing but a perpetual draft, because every book is never ending. A book that is the draft of a sketch, because the smallest constructions can be completed by their original architects, while the largest, the truest, always leave the conclusions on the tallest rooftops to fix and secure there the posterity of whoever reads them beyond the one who wrote it. My case, without looking any further.
Hell yeah.
Sick, yeah.
I'm sure Fresán's a good writer, but how much better is it when it's translated by Will? I mean, come on. Let's
I mean,
go.
there was one thing I was gonna sort of, I don't know how to ask it without getting into too much stuff, but like the adoption of the style, like because there is like and maybe putting words into a translator's mouth overall, there are like certain choices that you have to make in terms of like how much of the retention of the original style, the length of the sentences, with Spanish especially, like the way the clauses are arranged, the way that like things are, all the commas, all the like sort of proper way that it's evoked. Like you can totally change that. You can go totally into like matching today's like vernacular and today's like sort of aesthetic dominant aesthetics, right? Of like make it short clipped, make it Hemingway, make it everything. There's ways to do that. And there's a way that and that would be bad. And then there's a way in which like trying to capture everything in the order that it is. And no offense to Lydia Davis, but that's her approach to like translating Proust and various other French things. And that also doesn't seem to work because it is too obviously it's too literal and too that way. But I do think that merger, when it is like a Fresán Vanderhyden joint. Like it is a style that's between those two styles. It's like you're not even like within that. You have a style of writing, you have a style of expressing yourself, and Fresán does. And this book is somewhere that's a merger of those two,
Yeah,
something different than that. And how much that
I
like
think
plays into your
yeah.
mind as you translate it.
I mean, I think at this point I have a style of translating his style. You know what I mean? So like I have certain ways of seeing the choices that he's making and certain like built-in sort of muscle memory for how like I solve different problems or deal with his style in different ways. And so it is one of the he's definitely the writer that I feel like the most at home translating at this point. Um, yeah, I think that there is some happy medium between those two approaches that you're talking about. With him, I don't really I don't change his sentences very much at all, hardly at all. I feel like his it's so it's so intentional and so self-consciously the way it is that unless I mean I'll change punctuation sometimes, you know, add a semicolon
Mhm.
or whatever. But yeah, I don't really change locations of periods very often. I kind of stick with what he does. But I definitely change syntax. I rearrange syntax to like have it feel more like Fresán in English to me, you know, at this point.
How did you do that with the thumbs up
I
there?
don't know how that thumbs up just came up, but
Came out of your
that was
mouth,
great.
in fact. It was like a bubble. For anyone who's listening, there's like a bubble, big bubble that had a thumbs up inside it coming out of
It's
Will's mouth as he was
it's
Or
talking.
the other quotes.
it's the
Very,
ghost.
very weird. But yet, yeah, I mean, there is like I feel like there's some sort of tendency among certain presses and people in translated where like the book maybe doesn't have the most distinctive style in which they're trying to appeal to the widest possible audience.
Mhm.
Whereas the widest possible audience for Fresán and for any book that is of this level is being representing it in its complexity, in its like
Yeah.
non Hemingway-esque sort of thing. Way to go, Brian. Brian's the last of thumbs up. I think you're giving thumbs up to me in that regard. But anyways, Brian, line of the week. What do you got?
All right, so I already shared the Awesome Ghost one. I like this one too. It feels like a portent. It's on page 59. And of course, there's nothing more dangerous for a hapless wastrel than to convince himself that he is or might become a hero.
Mm.
Okay, you got yours because I've got two, and I'm hoping you choose one of them.
I do. Page 19 in the footnotes, bottom of the first long paragraph. Reality only becomes really real after crossing the stormy sea of art and arriving safe and sound to the other shore. Not while we live it or write it, but later when we read it. And only then does everything become logical and inevitable, and we ask ourselves how we failed to see it or see it coming.
Love that one.
Yeah. Elon.
Yeah, well, every like this is just it's fucking beautiful.
For anyone, the Elon references that Brian has a lot of rockets coming over his face. He has a lot of rockets coming all over his face. I'm going to read my two because they kind of go back to back. One is from 49, in the footnote, a style that no longer runs through what is written, but through how it is written. And then page 44, and the absence of past is compensated for by the omnipresence of future. I think those two are great, like Fresán sort of lines. But I love the style thing, obviously. But celebrate! You're getting out of control with these emoticons, man. I don't even know how to. Oh, there it is. But anyways, so anyone final thoughts? We have for next week, we go up to page 130 or 123. There's like a line that ends on page 123. This is a long section, so we're in the middle of a section and in the middle of part 2. So it kind of is in the middle. Hopefully it like lands like this one did, but we do finish this first part and move on. And obviously like, rate, review, subscribe to the nice whales. Got whales now coming on the screen. Get to the whale. If you're reading this and if you're listening on the podcast in your Apple or Spotify or wherever, there is a link to the right RSS feed and right version of this that you should be using and subscribing to. Please do that because at the end of the season, the other feed will be gone. So just go to that feed and subscribe to it. Like and review it. There's only a few reviews so far, so you know which one it is. Also, we're on YouTube. Do all that mashing of whatever you do on YouTube. Any final thoughts from anyone?
I just would plug the Between the Covers interview with Fresán too for people who are interested. I'd go check that out. That just came out this past week. And also there's a new short story that I translated for the Southwest Review for their latest issue, which is now available online. So
I saw that this morning and I was like, oh, I need to go read that, but like I didn't get to it for this. But
it's pretty cool. It's from his second book called Vidas de Santos, Lives of Saints. And it's a story about Oppenheimer and Glenn Gould. They're both characters in it. It's really, really cool. Got another one coming in Baffler magazine in their next issue as well, from his first book, Historia Argentina. So just plugging those.
Also Beyond the Zero interview with you, Will, is from maybe 2 weeks ago. We'll link to all three of those things in the show notes, so you can find all of them very easily. But yeah, the David Naiman interview is really spectacular. It's quite comprehensive, and it's almost 2 hours long. So it's like a really good conversation. And I know that the one with Beyond the Zero is fantastic too. I did not listen to it yet because I did not want to taint our conversation with you in any way. Or feel like we're just repeating things.
Yeah, it's fun. And for subscribers to Between the Covers, you can hear my interview with David Naiman as well, where we talk quite a bit about Fresán, but also just generally about translating.
And if you don't want to give him money, you can give us money, and we'll give you the access to that interview for set money. If you want to do like some sort of, do you have confidence in me? Because I've got this book here in which I can put your name down. You can have access to this special interview.
Grift.
$25 is all I need.
Grift.
Just blew all my money on a Trump watch and some fragrance. I'm like out.
Matila,